I once saw two people arguing, voices raised, egos louder than truth. One walked away calm, the other stayed, furious. Everyone thought the loud one won, but years later, the quiet one was winning at life. Here's the truth. Most people don't understand. Strong people don't win arguments, they avoid them, not because they are weak, but because they are wise. Let me tell you why. The first key point is that arguments feed the ego, not the soul. And most people don't realize this because ego is loud, persuasive, and very good at pretending it is truth. Ego tells you if you don't respond, you look weak. It whispers if you don't correct them, they'll think they're smarter, so you speak, you push, you defend. Not because your life depends on it, but because your self-image feels threatened. Think about how many times you've argued with someone and later asked yourself, why did I even care? In that moment, it wasn't wisdom guiding you. It was the need to protect a version of yourself that felt small, unseen, or disrespected. Strong people notice this feeling early. They pause, they see the ego knocking, and they don't open the door. Most arguments don't start with logic, they start with emotion. Someone feels ignored, someone feels challenged, someone feels exposed. Suddenly, the conversation becomes a courtroom where no one is listening. Everyone is just waiting to speak. I once knew a man who argued about everything: politics, work, family decisions, even where to park the car. He believed sharp words made him look intelligent. But over time, people stopped asking for his opinion. Not because he lacked intelligence, but because every conversation felt like a fight. Compare that with someone who listens quietly, speaks less, but when they do speak, their words carry weight. That person doesn't rush to defend themselves. Their identity is not fragile. They don't need applause after every sentence. That calm doesn't come from silence. It comes from self-respect. Ego loves victory. The soul values peace. Ego wants the last word. The soul wants clarity. When you argue, notice how your body reacts. Your chest tightens. Your breath becomes shallow. Your mind races, searching for sharper words. That's not strength, that's stress. Real strength feels steady. It feels grounded. It feels like knowing you don't have to convince everyone of your worth. A woman once shared how she used to argue constantly with her partner over small things: tone of voice, forgotten texts, tiny misunderstandings. One day she chose not to respond, not to punish, not to manipulate, just to observe. What surprised her was not the silence, but the relief. Her mind felt lighter. Her energy returned. She realized many of those arguments were never about the issue. They were about feeling valued. There's a hidden cost to feeding the ego. Every argument trains your mind to stay alert for threats. You start scanning conversations, not for understanding but for offense. You become reactive, defensive, tired. Strong people refuse to live in that constant tension. They understand that not every comment deserves a response, and not every misunderstanding requires correction. Sometimes people speak from their wounds, not their wisdom. Arguing with them is like shouting at a storm and expecting it to calm down. Instead of changing the storm, you exhaust yourself. Strength is recognizing what drains you and choosing not to step into it. Ego is impatient. It wants resolution now. It wants validation immediately. But growth happens slowly, quietly, often without witnesses. Strong people trust that. They don't rush to prove their point because they know time will do that better than words ever could. Think of someone at work who stays consistent, focused, and composed, even when criticized unfairly. They don't defend themselves in every meeting. They let their results speak. Over months, people begin to notice respect grows, not because of arguments won, but because of character shown. Ego shouts, "Look at me." Strength whispers, "Watch me." There is also a deep freedom in letting go of the need to be right. When you stop feeding the ego, you reclaim mental space. You start hearing more than reacting. You begin understanding instead of interrupting. This doesn't mean you agree with everything, it means you choose where your energy goes. A teacher once said that wisdom is not knowing what to say, but knowing when silence says more. Strong people aren't silent because they have nothing to say. They are silent because they have learned the cost of unnecessary words. They've seen friendships break, families drift, and inner peace disappear over battles that never mattered in the long run. When the ego is quiet, something else becomes audible. Your intuition. You start sensing when a conversation is going nowhere. You recognize when someone isn't asking to understand, but asking to win. And instead of feeling the urge to prove yourself, you feel the strength to step back. That strength doesn't come from superiority. It comes from self-knowledge, from knowing your values, from trusting that your worth doesn't rise or fall based on someone else's opinion. Strong people don't starve their ego accidentally. They do it deliberately, again and again, until peace becomes their natural state and arguments lose their grip on their mind. The second key point is that not every mind is ready for truth, and this is one of the hardest lessons to accept, because deep inside you want to help, you want to explain, you want to clear the confusion and feel understood. But truth is not just information, it's a responsibility. It requires humility to receive it. It requires courage to sit with it. Some people are not rejecting your words, they are protecting their comfort. And when you speak truth to someone who is not ready, it doesn't land as guidance. It feels like an attack. Strong people sense this early. They don't mistake resistance for curiosity. They don't force clarity into a space that is emotionally closed. Think about how truth works in real life. A seed only grows in soil that's ready. Drop it on concrete, and it doesn't mean the seed is weak. It means the ground is hard. Many minds are hardened by fear, pride, past wounds, or the need to feel superior. You may be speaking calmly, clearly, with good intentions, but the listener hears danger. They hear loss of control. They hear a threat to their identity. A man once tried to help his younger brother by constantly correcting his choices, career, habits, relationships. Every word was logical, every point made sense. But the brother grew distant, defensive, and eventually silent. Years later, he admitted he wasn't angry at the advice. He just wasn't ready to change. And being reminded of that made him feel small. Strong people learn to read readiness, not just reactions. They notice the eyes, the posture, the tone. They can tell when someone is asking a question to learn versus asking a question to challenge. There's a difference between curiosity and confrontation. When someone is curious, their mind is open even if they disagree. When Psalm E1 is defensive, their mind is already busy building walls. Strong people don't try to knock those walls down with words. They understand that truth forced is truth wasted. So they step back. Not because they lack confidence, but because they respect timing. There is also a quiet maturity in realizing that some people don't want truth. They want agreement. They want reassurance that their current beliefs are enough. When truth threatens that, it creates discomfort, and most people avoid discomfort at all costs. A woman once shared how she tried to explain healthy boundaries to a friend who thrived on chaos. Every conversation turned into an argument. The friend said she wanted growth, but her actions showed resistance. Eventually, the woman stopped explaining, not out of bitterness but clarity. Months later, that same friend came back asking the same questions but with a different energy. The truth hadn't changed, the mind had. Strong people don't confuse silence with surrender. Sometimes silence is an invitation for the other person to grow on their own. When you stop explaining, you stop interfering with someone's journey. You allow life to become the teacher, and life teaches far better than arguments ever could. A father once stopped lecturing his son about responsibility. He stopped repeating lessons that were falling on deaf ears. Years passed. Experience did what words couldn't. When the son finally asked for guidance, the father spoke less, but every word mattered. Readiness turns simple words into powerful ones. There's also protection in this awareness. Speaking truth to the unready can drain you emotionally. You leave conversations feeling misunderstood, frustrated, even doubting yourself. Strong people guard their energy. They know their wisdom is not endless fuel for debate. They choose where to invest it. Just because you see clearly doesn't mean everyone else is looking through the same lens. Some people are still adjusting their eyes to the light. Pushing them faster only blinds them further. Strength is patience without resentment. And sometimes the hardest part is accepting that you were once unready too. There were truths you avoided, lessons you resisted, advice you ignored, until life slowed you down and made you listen. Strong people remember that phase with humility. That memory softens their approach. They don't look down on others for not understanding yet. They simply wait. They trust the process. They trust that when a mind is ready, even a quiet sentence can change a life. The third key point is that silence is not losing control, it is mastering it. And this idea goes against everything you were taught growing up. You were taught to respond quickly, to defend yourself, to explain your side before someone misunderstands you. Silence was framed as weakness, hesitation, even fear. But real life teaches a different lesson. The loudest reaction often comes from the most fragile place inside a person. When something touches a nerve, words rush out like a reflex. Strong people feel that same impulse, but they don't obey it. They notice the heat rising in their chest, the urge to interrupt, the need to prove. And instead of releasing it outward, they hold it inward. That holding is not suppression, it is awareness. Anyone can react in the moment. That takes no skill. A raised voice, a sharp reply, a sarcastic comment, these are easy. They spill out automatically. But silence requires effort. It requires trust in yourself. It requires believing that you don't have to correct every misunderstanding immediately. Think of a crowded room where everyone is talking at once. The person who stops speaking doesn't disappear, they become noticeable. Silence has a presence, it creates space. And in that space, things become clear. Who is truly listening, who just wants to be heard, and who is speaking from insecurity rather than truth. There was a woman in a workplace who was constantly underestimated. People interrupted her, dismissed her ideas, spoke over her. At first, she fought back with words, meetings became tense, nothing changed. Then she did something unexpected. She spoke less but with intention. When interrupted, she paused instead of pushing. The room grew uncomfortable. People noticed. When she finally spoke again, everyone listened. Her silence wasn't passive, it was deliberate. It shifted the power without a single argument. Silence, when chosen consciously, reorganizes the room. Silence also protects you from saying things you can't take back. Words spoken in emotional heat have a long memory. They stay in relationships like cracks in glass. Small at first, but spreading quietly over time. Strong people respect the weight of words. They know that once released, words don't belong to you anymore. Silence gives you time. Time to cool down. Time to understand what you actually feel, not just what you want to shout. Many regrets are born not from silence, but from speaking too soon. Strength is choosing patience over immediate relief. There is a difference between silence and avoider. NCE. Avoidance comes from fear. Silence comes from confidence. Avoidance hides. Silence observes. When you are silent by choice, you are not running away. You are standing still while the storm passes. Think of the ocean during a storm. The surface is wild, chaotic, but deep below it is calm. Strong people learn to live from that depth. They don't let surface noise decide their behavior. They wait, and in waiting, they keep their dignity intact. Silence also exposes others. When someone is trying to provoke you, and you don't respond, they are forced to sit with their own emotions. Their anger has nowhere to land. Their need for control finds no grip. This can make people uncomfortable, even aggressive. But that discomfort is not your responsibility. Strong people understand that they are not required to participate in every emotional invitation they receive. Just because someone hands you chaos doesn't mean you have to carry it. Silence is how you set that boundary without explanation. There's a quiet self-respect that grows when you stop reacting to everything. You begin to trust yourself more. You realize that your worth is not dependent on quick comebacks or constant defense. You don't need to prove that you are calm, you simply are. And others feel it. Children feel it, colleagues feel it, even strangers feel it. Calm becomes your reputation. Not because you announce it, but because your silence speaks consistently. Over time, you notice something else changing too. Your mind becomes clearer. Your decisions become steadier. You waste less energy replaying conversations in your head, imagining better replies. Silence gives you your mental space back. Strong people don't fear being misunderstood for a moment, because they trust that truth doesn't need urgency. They know that the right people will understand with time, and those who don't were never listening anyway. Silence is not empty, it is full of self-control, self-knowledge, and quiet strength. And the more you practice it, the less you feel the need to raise your voice at all. The fourth key point is that arguments steal time from your purpose, and most people don't notice the theft until years later. Time doesn't disappear loudly, it leaks. It slips away in small moments, 10 minutes here, an hour there, replaying conversations in your head, crafting better responses, proving points to people who have already moved on. While you're mentally arguing, your life is paused. Your goals wait patiently while your attention is trapped in a moment that no longer exists. Strong people see time as sacred. They don't hand it over to distractions dressed as importance. They ask themselves quietly and honestly, is this moving my life forward or just keeping me busy? Think about how arguments linger. The conversation ends, but your mind keeps going. You're driving, showering, trying to sleep, and suddenly you're back there again, rehearsing lines, correcting yourself, imagining a version where you said the perfect thing. That loop feels productive, but it produces nothing. It drains energy without creating value. A young man once shared how he would argue endlessly online about opinions that didn't affect his real life. Hours vanished. Days stacked up. One day he looked at his unfinished goals and realized something uncomfortable. While he was busy winning debates, life was quietly passing him by. Strong people catch that pattern early. They choose progress over proving a point. Purpose requires focus. Focus requires presence. Arguments pull you out of the present moment and lock you into reaction mode. When you're reacting, you're not creating, you're not building. You're responding to someone else's agenda. Strong people protect their attention like they protect their health. They understand that every argument is a detour. Some detours are short, some last years, and many people spend their entire lives on roads they never meant to travel, simply because they couldn't let something go. There was a woman with a clear dream to start a small business she believed in deeply. But every family gathering turned into the same argument, same doubts, same criticism, same need to explain herself. After each conversation, she felt drained, angry, and stuck. One day, she stopped explaining. She stopped defending. She used that energy to plan, to learn, to build quietly. Months later, the business existed. The arguments disappeared without resolution, not because she won them, but because her life moved forward. Purpose doesn't need permission. It needs time and consistency. Arguments also create urgency where none is required. They make everything feel like it must be settled now. But most things don't. Strong people understand timing. They know that some conversations don't deserve immediate attention, and some opinions don't deserve response at all. They delay reaction not out of fear, but wisdom. They know that what truly matters will still matter tomorrow, and what doesn't will fade on its own. Time reveals what's important better than any debate. Aligned with your purpose, you begin to feel how precious your hours are. You notice how quickly the day moves. You become more selective. Not everything earns your emotional involvement anymore. A craftsman working on something meaningful doesn't stop every few minutes to argue with passers-by about how the work should be done. He keeps his hands moving. His attention stays with the work. Strong people treat their lives the same way. They don't pause their progress to satisfy every distraction that demands engagement. There is a quiet discipline in choosing not to argue. It's the discipline of staying on your path while noise surrounds you. It's understanding that energy is limited and must be spent intentionally. Every argument avoided becomes time invested somewhere else, in learning, in growth, in rest, in connection, in building something that lasts. Strong people don't see avoidance as loss, they see it as redirection. They know that the future is shaped not by the battles you win with words, but by what you consistently choose to work on when no nay is watching. When you look back on your life years from now, you won't remember most of the arguments you had. You won't remember the clever replies or the moments you proved someone wrong. But you will remember what you built, what you learned, who you became. Strong people live with that awareness daily. They choose to invest their time where it compounds, not where it disappears. And once you truly feel the value of your time, arguments lose their appeal. Not because you are above them, but because your life has something better waiting for your attention. The fifth key point is that winning an argument can cost you a relationship, and this is a loss that often reveals itself slowly, quietly, when it's already too late. In the moment, winning feels satisfying. Your logic lands, your words hit their target, the other person goes silent, and it feels like victory. But silence doesn't always mean understanding. Sometimes it means retreat. Sometimes it means the door closed just a little. Strong people sense that difference. They know that relationships are not debates to be scored, they are living things, sensitive to tone, timing, and intention. One sharp exchange can undo years of trust if it cuts in the wrong place. Many people confuse honesty with harshness. They believe that if something is true, it must be said exactly as it appears in their mind. But truth without care becomes a weapon. Think of how a doctor speaks to a patient. The same diagnosis can heal or harm depending on how it's delivered. Strong people understand this instinctively. They choose connection over correction. They realize that being right means little if the person across from them feels smart, unheard, or humiliated. A man once recalled how he always corrected his wife in public, not out of cruelty but habit. He wanted facts to be accurate. Over time, she spoke less around him. He won every argument and lost her openness. Arguments change the emotional memory of a relationship. Even when resolved, the feeling lingers. The words may be forgotten, but the tone remains. Strong people pay attention to that invisible residue. They understand that people don't remember what you proved, they remember how they felt around you. A friend who always needs to win becomes exhausting. A partner who keeps score creates distance. A parent who argues to dominate rather than guide raises children who stop sharing their inner world. Strength is not dominance, it is safety. There is also pride involved in winning. The ego likes to feel superior, especially with people close to us. It whispers that respect comes from authority, not empathy. But real respect grows when people feel seen. A teacher once noticed that the students who learned the most were not the ones she corrected publicly, but the ones she guided privately. Correction in front of others often triggers shame. Shame builds walls. Strong people don't need an audience to feel secure. They care more about the bond than the moment. Sometimes winning an argument means forcing someone to agree outwardly while disagreeing inwardly. They nod, they stop responding. But inside something hardens. That's not resolution, that's withdrawal. Strong people listen for what's not being said. They notice when energy shifts, when warmth fades, when conversations become shorter. They don't celebrate those moments as victories. I treat them as warnings. Relationships thrive on openness, and arguments often teach people to hide instead. There's a story of two brothers who argued for years over a family decision. Each conversation ended with raised voices and sharp conclusions. Eventually, one brother stopped calling, not because the argument mattered anymore, but because the relationship felt unsafe. Years passed before they spoke again. When they did, neither could remember the exact words that caused the rift. They only remembered the feeling of not being understood. Strong people learn from these stories. They realize that closeness is fragile, and once broken, it takes far more effort to rebuild than it did to protect. Strong people also know when to let someone be wrong, especially when the cost of correcting them is closeness. Not every mistake needs immediate fixing. Not every misunderstanding needs confrontation. Love allows space for imperfection. A mother watching her adult child make choices she disagrees with doesn't argue every step. She stays present. She stays supportive. When the child is ready, they return for guidance. That door stays open because it was never slammed by constant correction. Strength is knowing that relationships grow through patience, not pressure. Winning an argument feeds the ego for a moment. Preserving a relationship feeds the soul over time. Strong people play the long game. They think beyond the sentence, beyond the day, beyond the moment. They ask themselves not just, am I right? But what will this do to us? And often they choose to soften their words or hold them back entirely, not because they fear losing, but because they understand what truly matters. The sixth key point is that calm is a language the weak can't speak, and that idea makes people uncomfortable because it exposes something they don't want to see in themselves. Calm doesn't shout, it doesn't rush, it doesn't explain itself. It just exists, steady and unmoved. When someone is calm in the middle of tension, it feels unsettling to those who depend on noise to feel powerful. Calm removes the stage. It refuses to participate in chaos. And when chaos doesn't get a response, it starts to collapse under its own weight. Strong people understand that calm is not a mood, it's a position they choose to stand in. You've seen this before, maybe without realizing it. Someone raises their voice, sharpens their words, tries to provoke a reaction. And the calm person doesn't match that energy. They don't mirror the anger. They don't rush to defend themselves. They speak slowly or not at all. Suddenly the balance shifts. The loud one feels exposed. Their intensity looks excessive. Calm has a way of revealing imbalance without saying a word. A manager once handled an angry customer by simply listening, nodding, and responding evenly. No excuses, no defensiveness. The customer ran out of steam. Calm didn't fight the fire, it let it burn itself out. Calm requires inner work. You can't fake it for long. If calm is not real, it cracks under pressure. That's why it's rare. Most people react because reaction is easier than regulation. Calm demands awareness of your own triggers. It asks you to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it through words. Strong people feel the same emotions as everyone else: anger, frustration, fear, but they don't let those emotions drive. They don't hand the steering wheel to the moment. They breathe, they slow down, they choose not to escalate. That choice is invisible to most, but powerful to all. There's a reason calm unsettles people who thrive on conflict. Conflict gives them identity. It gives them motion. Calm takes that away. When you don't argue back, they can't play their role. They may push harder, say sharper things, try to pull you into the storm. This is the test. Calm is not passive. It is firm without being loud. It holds its ground without attacking. A woman once described how staying calm during repeated criticism made others uncomfortable. They expected defense. They got stillness. Over time, the criticism stopped. Calm rewrote the rules of the interaction. Calm also sends a message to yourself. It tells your nervous system that you are safe, even when others are not settled. This is not weakness. This is self-trust. When you stay calm, you stop outsourcing your emotional state to other people's behavior. You don't need them to be respectful for you to be centered. You don't need them to agree for you to feel steady. That independence is strength. It allows you to stay clear-minded while others lose clarity. Decisions made from calm are rarely regretted. Children understand calm instinctively. They gravitate toward the adult who doesn't panic, who doesn't explode, who doesn't make everything urgent. Calm feels safe. Adults are no different, even if they don't admit it. In teams, families, friendships, the calm person becomes the anchor. Not because they control others, but because they control themselves. Strong people don't demand respect, they attract it through consistency. Their calm become flicked, but toward calm, peace changes how you move through the world. You begin to walk slower, not because you lack urgency, but because you no longer feel chased by other people's opinions. A man once described how he used to wake up already bracing for confrontation, at work, at home, even in his own thoughts. Every disagreement felt personal. One day, after a small argument that left him drained, he chose not to engage the next time. He didn't explain, he didn't justify, he simply let it pass. That night, he slept better than he had in years. Nothing outside had changed, but something inside had loosened its grip. Peace is not avoidance of life, it is engagement without resistance. When you stop arguing with people, you also stop arguing with reality. You accept that others will think differently, choose differently, and live differently. That acceptance frees enormous energy. Strong people don't waste strength trying to reshape everyone else's mind. They focus on shaping their own character. Peace allows you to respond instead of react. It gives you the space to choose words carefully or choose silence without feeling defeated by it. There's a deep maturity in realizing that you don't need to correct everyone to live truthfully. Truth doesn't collapse because someone disagrees with it. A teacher once told her students that knowledge grows best in quiet minds. The loudest students often wanted attention, not understanding. The ones who listened deeply asked fewer questions, but better ones. Peace works the same way. When your inner world is settled, you don't feel the urge to prove yourself constantly. You let your life speak in ways arguments never could. Peace also, heals parts of you that conflict keeps reopening. Every argument pokes old wounds, memories of being unheard, dismissed, or judged. When you choose peace, you stop reopening those scars. You give yourself permission to rest. A woman who had spent years in emotionally charged family debates finally stepped back. At first, she felt guilty, then she felt free. Over time, her relationships didn't collapse, they recalibrated. People learned how to approach her differently. Peace trained others how to treat her without a single confrontation. Strong people understand that peace is not passive. It is an active choice made daily. It means choosing not to chase validation. It means letting go of the urge to have the last word. It means trusting that your worth does not depend on how convincingly you argue your case. Peace becomes a filter. Through it, you see which battles matter and which ones only steal from you. You stop feeling pulled into every disagreement because you finally know what you're protecting. There's also a quiet confidence that grows from peace. When you are at peace, criticism doesn't shake you the same way. Disagreement doesn't feel like rejection. You don't take every comment personally because you're no longer fighting an internal war. Strong people are not hardened, they are settled. They don't need armor because they are not constantly under attack. Peace softens your reactions without weakening your boundaries. You can say no calmly. You can disagree without hostility. You can walk away without resentment. Peace gives you a wider view of life. You start seeing how small many arguments really are in the context of time. What felt urgent last year barely stirs now. Strong people live with that awareness. They understand that the energy they save from conflict becomes energy they can invest in growth, creativity, and connection. Peace doesn't mean your life becomes easy. It means your life becomes clearer. And in that clarity, you finally recognize that the greatest victory was never about winning against others. It was about no longer needing to fight at all. At some point, you realize that life feels lighter when you stop carrying battles that were never yours to win. You notice how much quieter your mind becomes when you no longer rehearse conversations that already ended, when you stop defending yourself against people who were never trying to understand you. That quiet isn't emptiness, it's space to think clearly, space to feel deeply, space to live with intention instead of reaction. Strength, real strength, doesn't show itself in sharp words or quick replies. It shows itself in restraint, in patience, in the ability to walk away without bitterness. It's the confidence of knowing who you are without needing constant confirmation. When you stop arguing, you don't lose your voice, you refine it. You begin to speak only when it matters, and when you do, your words carry weight because they are no longer fueled by ego or urgency. You also begin to see people differently. You recognize that everyone is fighting something you can't see, carrying beliefs shaped by experiences you didn't live. That understanding softens you without making you weak. It allows you to choose compassion without sacrificing boundaries, silence without surrender, calm without indifference. You stop trying to fix everyone, correct everyone, or convince everyone. And in doing so, you protect something far more valuable than being right. You protect your peace. As you step back into your life, nothing outside needs to change immediately. The world can remain noisy, opinions can remain loud, disagreements can still exist. What changes is where you stand within all of it. You stand steady. You stand grounded. You no longer feel pulled into every storm that passes by. You let some things move through without attaching yourself to them, trusting that clarity doesn't require conflict to survive. This way of living doesn't make you distant. It makes you deliberate. It teaches you that peace is not an escape from life, but a way of meeting it with maturity and self-respect. And when you choose peace again and again, quietly, consistently, you discover something simple and powerful. You are no longer reacting to the world. You are moving through it on your own terms,